잘할 수 있다는 희망이나 다른 곳 에이. 아무것도 듣지 못한다면 혹은 아무것도 하지 못한다면 그건 변명이야 I want you on and on Yeah I want you on and on I want you on and on yeah I want you on and on, on and on Want you on and on and on
The day had started like any other, with you rushing to finish packing for the business trip. You'd known about the trip for weeks, but the idea of spending days alone with your boss had been something you'd pushed to the back of your mind. He was a man of few words, but when he did speak, his words always carried weight. There was something about him that unnerved you, a sharpness in his gaze, a confidence in his stride that made you feel small in comparison. You arrived at the airport earlier than expected, hoping to avoid any awkward encounters. After checking in and making your way through security, you found a quiet spot near the gate to settle in with a book, hoping to distract yourself from the nerves swirling in your stomach. Just as you were beginning to lose yourself in the pages, you heard his voice. Cutting it close, aren't we? You looked up to see him standing over you, one brow raised in a mixture of amusement and mild irritation. He looked as put together as ever, his dark suit immaculate, his tie perfectly knotted. I like to be on time, you replied, trying to sound nonchalant as you closed your book. On time? Yes, but I prefer early, he said, taking the seat next to you without asking. His presence was overwhelming, filling the space with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. You gave a small nod, unsure of what to say. You'd always found it difficult to talk to him, his demeanor making it clear that he expected only the best from everyone around him. He glanced at your carry-on, noting the way you'd overstuffed it. That's going to be a pain to fit in the overhead compartment, he remarked dryly. You bit your, resisting the urge to snap back. I'll manage. He let out a small, almost imperceptible sigh. You always do, he murmured, more to himself than to you. The softness in his tone caught you off guard, making you wonder if you'd imagined it. The announcement for boarding interrupted the movement, and you both stood, collecting your belongings. As you walked towards the gate, he fell into step beside you, his long strides easily matching yours. Are you prepared for the meetings? He asked, his tone shifting back to business. Of course, you replied, grateful for the change in topic. I've reviewed all the documents and prepared the presentations. Everything's ready. He nodded, his expression unreadable. Good. This trip is important. We can't afford any mistakes. You didn't miss the "we" in his sentence. It was rare for him to acknowledge the team, usually opting to place the burden squarely on his own shoulders. It was part of what made him such a formidable boss, but it also added to the pressure. As you approached the plane, you handed your ticket to the attendant and stepped onto the jet bridge. Your boss followed close behind, his presence a constant reminder of the power dynamics at play. When you reached your seats, your heart sank. The two of you were seated right next to each other, with you by the window and him on the aisle. You hesitated for a moment, then moved past him and sat down, your movements stiff with discomfort. You could feel his eyes on you as you settled into your seat, but you didn't dare meet his gaze. Once he was seated, he turned to you, his expression as unreadable as ever. "This flight will give us time to go over some details," he said, his tone making it clear that this wasn't a suggestion. You nodded, keeping your response short. "Sure." The flight attendants began their safety briefing, and you took the opportunity to look away, focusing on the window as the plane began to taxi down the runway. You could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy, but you were determined to keep your cool. The plane lifted off smoothly, and for a while everything was calm. You focused on the view outside, hoping the clouds would offer some distraction. But as the minutes ticked by, you couldn't shake the feeling that this flight was going to be anything but ordinary. The airplane cabin hummed with the soft murmur of passengers and the distant whir of engines. You were seated by the window, your boss occupying the aisle seat beside you. The tension in the air was palpable, thickening with every passing minute. You could feel the weight of his presence next to you, the subtle scent of his cologne, the controlled rhythm of his breathing. You shifted uncomfortably in your seat, trying to ignore the proximity and focus on the view outside the window. An hour into the flight, the uneasy silence was shattered when you felt a sudden weight on your legs. Startled, you looked down to see your boss's blazer over your lap. "Cover your legs," he said, his tone a mix of frustration and command. His eyes blinked downward, then back to your face. "They're distracting." His words caught you off guard. You felt a surge of anger rises within you. Without a second thought, you grabbed the blazer and tossed it back to him. "I can do whatever I want with my," you snapped, turning your gaze back to the window. "It's mine." For a moment there was silence. Then you felt his presence shift, his arm extending across your seat, effectively cornering you. His face was close to yours, his breath warm against your ear. "You better cover these legs before I drag you into one of those," he whispered, his voice low and sending a shiver down your spine. then you won't be able to for a while. Your breath caught in your throat, your heart pounding in your chest. His words were a mix of and promise, with the intensity that both scared and thrilled you. You swallowed hard, the weight of his gaze down on you. Slowly, you reached for the blazer and it over your legs, your hands trembling slightly. You could feel his eyes on you, studying your every move. "Good girl," he murmured, leaning back into his seat, satisfied. His arm remained casually over the armrest, still close enough that you could feel the radiating from his. You tried to steady your breathing, your mind racing. The cabin around you seemed to fade into the background, leaving just the two of you in this tense, charged moment. You were aware of every small movement he made, every subtle shift in his posture. As the flight continued, you found yourself unable to focus on anything else. The memory of his words echoed in your mind, mingling with the sensation of his proximity. The line between fear and blurred, leaving you in a state of confused longing. The rest of the flight passed in a haze of suppressed emotions and stolen glances. You kept your legs covered, the blazer a constant reminder of the tension between you. When the plane finally began its descent, you felt a mix of relief and disappointment. The intense encounter had left you shaken, but also craving more. As the plane touched down, your boss finally broke the silence. "We'll be spending a lot of time together on this trip," he said, his voice calm and composed, as if nothing had happened. "Make sure you're prepared for that." You nodded, not trusting yourself to speak. The implications of his words hung in the air, promising more of the charged interactions that had left you breathless. As you disembarked the plane, you couldn't help but wonder what else this trip had in store for you, and if you were ready to
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature and it haunts me.